Hello, I'm Dr. Christopher Korolczuk, 2020 graduate of St. John's University doctoral program in educational leadership. My research examined the relationship between career burnout and mindset levels of principals in New York State. The focus of my research is reflective of the intersection between both my personal and professional life. Professionally, I've been involved in public education for over 20 years, 15 of which in leadership capacity. I've chosen to work in some of the most demanding environments. I've worked in two juvenile detention facilities, one in Los Angeles and one in New York, as well as highly specialized special education programs. During my time working in these environments, I have witnessed amazing and dedicated and effective school building principals. However, I've also recognized the high level of turnover and burnout many of these principals served through my years. And it got me wondering, why do the schools that require the most stable, the most effective, and the strongest leaders oftentimes not get what they deserve and have building leaders and principals that burn out? Personally, throughout my entire life, I've gained great internal satisfaction, not just in reaching goals I set out for, but also in the process and the experience of striving for these goals. It's this inner drive, coupled with a growth mindset of my own, that have allowed me to lead various organizations, remain a competitive athlete, live in different parts of our great country, and strive to be the best father and husband that I can be. All of this, no matter what obstacles are thrown in my path. It was these aforementioned professional experiences coupled with my personal mindset that was the driving force behind my research. And now that you understand the background and the context for my research, I'm going to delve right into it. The purpose of examining the relationship between career burnout and mindset levels of New York State principals is rooted in social justice. Public education truly is the cornerstone of our democratic society. Our schools, therefore all of society, need effective leaders. And to hold on to effective leaders, we need to make sure that burnout levels stay low. However, what do we know? We know that approximately 20% of principals leave their position annually. 8% leave the field of education altogether. Despite these staggering and alarming rates, the rate of principal turnover in high need and high concentration schools of minority students is almost twice as high. Not only is there an educational cost to principal turnover related to burnout, but there's also a financial cost. One study indicates that approximately $75,000 is the cost in high poverty areas to replace a school principal. You can see from this chart that compared to all schools, once the percentage of free reduced amongst students increases, so does the turnover rate of building principals. Moving on to a more promising topic, current research also indicates that the lens through which we view our own skills and abilities, otherwise known as our mindset, impacts our life's outcomes. Individuals who possess more of a growth mindset believe that outcomes are malleable and they're not fixed and predetermined entities. And under the proper conditions, we can improve our current situation. Now that we've identified the need for building principles that are retained, especially in high need areas, and we also understand the mindset, which is the lens that we view our own skills and abilities through, let's look at my three research questions. Research question number one: Is there a significant relationship between the feelings of career burnout and mindset for principals in New York State? Research question number 2. Are there differences in feelings of career burnout based on demographic and background characteristics for principals in New York State? And the third research question, how much of career burnout is explained by mindset when controlling for demographic and background characteristics for principals in New York State? To explore these 3 research questions, a quantitative correlational design was used. The dependent variable was career burnout, while the independent variable was mindset. There were other secondary independent variables that include sex, years of administrative experience, years as principal at the current location, tenure status, level of school, type of school, school location, and race. The measurement used to measure the independent variable of mindset was the Dweck Mindset Instrument, or DMI, which was a Likert scale consisting of 16 questions. The second variable, the dependent variable, career burnout, was measured using the Maslach Burnout Inventory Educator Survey, otherwise known as MBIES, also a Likert scale, and consisted of 22 questions. An important note for replication purposes is that some of these questions needed to be recoded in reverse order to maintain scoring consistency. As you can see from the chart on the screen, the internal reliability was high, with scores ranging from 0.76 to 0.90. And there was also a high degree of validity for both surveys. As you can see from the slide above or below, depending on where I am on the screen, the 3 research questions were measured in different ways. The first was measured using a Pearson correlation, and it examined the relationship between the 2 continuous variables. The second research question utilized both independent sample t-tests and a Welch ANOVA, and it examined the differences in burnout between growth and fixed mindset scores, and then also principles of varying demographic and background characteristics. And then for the third research question, a hierarchical regression was used. And this explored how much of career burnout is explained by mindset when background and other demographic variables were statistically controlled for. Now I'd like to share with you some information about the sample and the population, and also the design of the study. Non-random, purposive, and convenient sampling were utilized to achieve the sample size, or N, of 170 participants. As you can see from the chart, in New York, there's a total of 2,644 principals. However, this study excluded New York City school district principals from the population, that's what gave us the resulting 2,644. Altogether in New York State, there's 4,250 principals. Now I'm going to move into the first research question. Research question number 1. It examined the relationship between the feelings of career burnout and mindset for principals in New York State. This utilized a bivariate Pearson correlation. There was a positive skew, as you can see, around the upper end of the range, whereas burnout scores clustered around the lower end of the range. Findings from the Pearson correlation indicate that there was a weak, non-significant linear association between mindset and burnout, where P equals 0.134. In addition, the effect size of the relationship, as indicated by R squared, equaled 0.013, which indicated a weak association, and that mindset level of principals account for only 1.34% of the variability in career burnout scores. These findings indicate that as mindset scores increase and shift away from a fixed mindset, the level of career burnout decreases. Although this weak negative linear association was not statistically significant, results have important practical implications. The results show that generally, principals in New York State face low levels of career burnout, which is promising and a pleasure to hear. Research question number 2, which examined the difference of group means in feelings of career burnout based on demographic and background characteristics. Independent sample t-tests found that there was a statistically significant difference in mean burnout scores between principals who work on Long Island, and Long Island including both Nassau and Suffolk County, versus those who work in upstate New York, therefore rejecting the null hypothesis. Cohen's effect size of D equaled 0.41, suggesting a small to moderate level of practical significance. Although that was significant, the Welch-Genova found that there were no statistically significant differences in principals' mean burnout scores between different levels of schools. In summary, results related to research question number 2 indicate that there was no statistically significant difference at the 0.05 level for demographic and background variables such as sex, years of experience, tenure status, type of school, related to career burnout, except for school location, as earlier indicated. School location, as I mentioned earlier, was differentiated between Long Island, including Nassau and Suffolk County, and upstate. Overall, though, the null hypothesis for research question number 2 failed to be rejected. Potential reasons why a significance, though, was found for location, which examined upstate versus Long Island principals, is consistent with current research, which indicates that 1 in 5 principals from rural areas leave their position annually, while only 1 in 6 leave in suburban areas nationwide. This may have to do with a whole host of reasons. Some of them possibly could be geography. Principals in upstate New York have large swaths of geography that they're responsible for. As well, New York, especially Long Island, has an extremely high tax revenue base. Most of the tax revenue goes towards education and salaries, and having financial resources may also tend to contribute to this difference between upstate and Long Island. When we examine finances and the resources that principals have, we also have to look at the responsibilities that are placed on administrators. Whereas with more financial abilities within schools, maybe on Long Island, there might be a larger cabinet of people and administrators to help principals out, whereas in upstate, that might not be possible. Now, moving on to research question number 3. Research question number 3 examined how much a career burnout is explained by mindset when controlling for demographic and background characteristics of principals in New York State. A hierarchical multiple regression was used to assess how much a career burnout is explained by growth mindset when controlling for demographic and background characteristics, such as sex, total years in the field of education, total years as a school administrator, total years at their current school, tenure status, the level of school, etc. The first model, which included demographic characteristics alone to predict burnout, found the demographic characteristics alone explain 11% of the variance in mean burnout scores for principals in New York State. The second model, which represented the total variance explained by the model as a whole, was 11.7. Therefore, when controlling for demographic characteristics, growth mindset only explained 0.7% of the variance in burnout, which resulted in the null hypothesis failing to be rejected. Findings related to research question number 3 indicate that mindset didn't explain a significant amount of variance of burnout when demographic characteristics were controlled for. These findings are consistent with current research in the field that indicates predictors of principal burnout oftentimes are external factors such as working conditions, influence on decision-making, and salaries, and not internal variables such as mindset. Sublimitations of the current study include a type 2 error, possibly because of the small n size. There were 170 participants that took part in this study. Also, we have to look at the generalization of results outside of New York State. New York is very unique. Not all states have tenure like New York does, and not all states also have unions like many of our districts have. Also, we have to look at sampling errors. The sample size for subgroups may not have accurately represented the population nationally or within New York State. Give you one example, by race. I believe in this study, 89% of the participants were white. However, in New York State, principals who are white only make up 79% of that subgroup. So there's an overrepresentation, as well as principals who are Black. In the current study, I believe there were 3% of the principals who participated in the study were Black. However, across New York State, 10% of the principals are Black, which is an underrepresentation by this study. Also, these surveys were administered right before a vacation between November and January of 2019. Also, purpose of convenience sampling was used. This study only reflects the results and data given from participants who chose to take part in the study. We don't know the results of those who chose not to participate in this study. It's also important to remember that this was a self-reporting study. Principals reported how they felt, and this is a snapshot in time. And we have to remember that throughout time, throughout each day, throughout each week, throughout the year, we all have different levels of career burnout and mindset, and we have to be cognizant of that. As a result of some of the limitations of the study that were just mentioned, we have to look at considerations for future research. Future research may want to examine the same variables, however, in a state without tenure. They also might want to look at states, and rather than looking at an intrastate comparison, maybe an interstate comparison. Maybe looking at states that don't have as much revenue devoted to education as New York State does. Other potential considerations for future research include surveying former principals, not just current principals, or including New York City in this study. And also trying to have a larger sample size and one that's more representative of the national population of principals. Also, it would be interesting for a longitudinal study for maybe a cohort group of principals over time, how their mindset and how their level of career burnout reflects as they go through different stages of their career. Also, a qualitative or a mixed method study might be a great consideration for future research. Lastly, the results of the study generally indicate low levels of career burnout and high levels of growth mindset for principals in New York State. However, this study was conducted just months prior to COVID-19 and the global pandemic we are now faced with. It would be interesting for future research to examine the same relationship in mindset following COVID-19 and during COVID-19 compared to prior to the global pandemic. It would be interesting to see how and if levels of both mindset and burnout have been impacted by COVID-19. In conclusion, I just want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my personal journey and my research with all of you. And I wish everyone health and success in your future endeavors. Thank you.